Have you ever witnessed a moment so shocking, so unjust, that it changed your entire perspective on how the world really works? Picture an ordinary day at John F. Kennedy International Airport, brimming with hopeful travelers and humming with the promise of reaching distant destinations. Among them stands Jennifer Wilson, a brilliant and determined black woman on a journey that should have been routine. But when an arrogant pilot, fueled by deep-seated prejudice, abruptly refuses to fly with her on board the stage, is set for a confrontation that will rock the entire airline industry and leave everyone gasping for justice. Jennifer Wilson woke up that morning in her small, cozy apartment on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. As she stretched, her mind buzzed with excitement for the day. She was scheduled to speak at a high-profile legal seminar in Los Angeles, an event that could catapult her career onto a national stage. Tall stacks of notes and color-coded folders lay beside her travel bag. But what gave Jennifer her true zeal wasn't just professional ambition. It was the unshakable sense of purpose fueling her pursuit of justice and equality. As a civil rights attorney with a rising reputation, she believed the law was a powerful tool to challenge bias and discrimination shadows she knew all too well. Stepping outside, she felt a crisp breeze cutting through the New York City air, even though it was early summer. Her driver for the morning, a kind older man named Rakesh, greeted her with a respectful nod. As the city's skyline slid by outside the taxi window, Jennifer organized her thoughts. She had been invited to the National Conference on Civil Rights and Corporate Accountability, an event that historically had been mostly male and predominantly white. Yet this year, she was a keynote speaker, an honor that signified the broader world was taking note of her tireless advocacy. Arriving at John F. Kennedy International Airport, Jennifer felt the familiar thrill of travel. The swirling mass of people lugging roller bags, the crackle of announcements echoing overhead. The sense of so many different journeys converging in one place, it reminded her of life's complexity and interconnectedness. She breezed through check-in, politely declining the offered upgrade to first class, since her legal firm was already covering her business class ticket. She had no need for further pampering. As she approached the security checkpoint, she noticed suspicious or curious glances aimed her way from a few passengers. Jennifer stood out, yes, but not just for the color of her skin. Her impeccable posture, the sleek line of her braided hair, and the confident set of her shoulders spoke volumes. If others were unsettled by her presence, it was their problem, not hers. She had learned long ago that self-assurance was both a shield and a guiding light. A slight snag came at the security conveyor belt. One of the TSA agents asked to inspect her laptop bag more closely. Jennifer didn't mind. She actually appreciated thoroughness. As she waited, she scrolled through a news article about a new Supreme Court hearing regarding racial profiling. She couldn't help but sigh at the irony, but she remained patient and calm. Soon the agent cleared her items, and she was on her way. She reached Gate 34B, where her flight on Airlines, one of the country's largest carriers, was scheduled to depart. Stretching across the floor-to-ceiling windows was a panoramic view of jets rolling across the tarmac. Jennifer took a moment to sip her cappuccino, feeling a surge of hope. Yes, the world was flawed, but she was heading to an event that celebrated efforts to make it better. In a few hours, she'd be in Los Angeles, ready to deliver a speech that might inspire new changes in corporate policies nationwide. However, just as she settled into a seat near the boarding area, an announcement crackled overhead. Attention passengers of Aerosky Flight AS247 to Los Angeles. There will be a slight delay. We apologize for any inconvenience. Jennifer glanced at her watch, mildly annoyed but not concerned. Delays happened. It was part of modern air travel. Little did she know this small inconvenience was the first tremor of an earthquake about to shake the very foundations of her life and send shockwaves through the entire airline industry. The minutes stretched into nearly an hour. Most of the passengers around Gate 34B tried to keep themselves entertained. Some scrolled through their phones, others tapped their feet anxiously, and a few stared out the windows at the blue sky that seemed to mock them with promises of easy flight. Jennifer remained calm, organizing her notes for the seminar. She'd meticulously planned her speech, weaving together data-driven insights and emotional appeals, all underscored by legal precedent. The delay meant she would arrive tight on schedule, but she trusted she'd make it. A voice broke through the hum of conversation. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're now ready to begin pre-boarding for Aerosky Flight AS247 to Los Angeles." A collective sigh of relief seemed to rise from the crowd. Jennifer gathered her belongings carefully, tucking her laptop into her bag, and walked toward the gate agent. As she handed over her boarding pass, the agent, an older woman with a stern expression, gave her a fleeting look of uncertainty. Jennifer knew that look all too well. A cautious hesitation, as if the agent was unsure whether to smile politely or hurry Jennifer along. But the moment passed, and the beep of the scanner granted her entry. Jennifer found her seat in business class 4A by the window. The seat's plush cushioning and extra legroom were a nice perk. She stowed her carry-on in the overhead compartment, carefully placing her laptop bag by her feet. She then settled into the seat, checking her phone one last time before turning on airplane mode. Her mother's message flashed on the screen. "Proud of you. Call me when you land." A small smile curved her lips. In that moment, Jennifer felt calm and prepared. But almost as soon as she relaxed, she sensed a sudden shift in the cabin's atmosphere. Passengers were still boarding, filing in with their carry-ons, but there was a distinct tension rippling through the forward cabin. It was in the hurried footsteps of the flight attendants, the hush that descended when the pilot, a tall, silver-haired man, stepped into the business class section. He appeared to scan the seats with a look that was both determined and troubled. Jennifer glanced up curiously. She had never seen a pilot walk into the cabin during pre-boarding like this, without greeting passengers cheerfully. The pilot's nameplate read, Captain Peter Caldwell. His chiseled face and stern jaw conveyed a sense of old-school authority. Aerosky had a reputation for employing some of the most seasoned pilots in the industry, so Jennifer assumed Caldwell was likely one of their best. Yet something about his expression seemed off, not the usual pre-flight stress, but a different kind of agitation. Caldwell paused near Jennifer's row, his icy blue eyes narrowing as they fell upon her. Her heart skipped a beat. She gave him a polite nod, but his stare felt invasive, as though he were measuring her worth and finding it lacking. She pretended to look away, hoping to diffuse whatever tension might be building. Within moments, Caldwell's expression hardened further. Instead of returning to the cockpit, he leaned in to speak with one of the flight attendants, a woman wearing a crisp navy uniform. Though Jennifer couldn't hear their hushed conversation, the pilot's body language spoke volumes. He gestured in Jennifer's direction, brows furrowed, lips pressed into a thin line. The flight attendant looked taken aback, but nodded reluctantly. Seconds later, the pilot strode off, leaving the flight attendant behind. Jennifer's chest felt tight as she tried to dismiss the scene as a misunderstanding. Perhaps Caldwell had recognized her from somewhere, or there was an issue with seat assignments. She told herself not to jump to conclusions, not to assume that every odd glance or abrupt gesture was racially motivated. After all, she was used to the microaggressions, but had learned to choose her battles. But the subtle tension was building, and in her gut, Jennifer could sense that what she'd just witnessed was no ordinary seat-related query. The flight attendant approached her face, pale, clearly trying to mask discomfort with professional composure. Jennifer braced herself for whatever was about to unfold. She could never have predicted the lengths to which the pilot would go, and how profoundly it would disrupt not only this flight, but her entire life's direction. "Ma'am," the flight attendant began, voice tight with discomfort. "I'm so sorry to bother you, but we've encountered a situation." Jennifer felt her stomach clench. "Is something wrong with my ticket?" she asked, checking the seat number. Everything seemed in order. The flight attendant's eyes flickered with conflict. "Actually, it's not your ticket, ma'am. Captain Caldwell has—" She paused, swallowing hard. "He's asked if you could step off the plane for a moment to clarify a matter with your booking. We'll do our best to get you reseated right away." Jennifer's eyebrows shot up. "Step off the plane?" "But we're about to depart. I have a speaking engagement in Los Angeles." "I understand, ma'am." The attendant's voice was polite, but quavering. "It will just take a few minutes." With every pair of eyes in business class now turned in her direction, Jennifer felt her cheeks flush. She carefully collected her belongings, laptop bag, purse, and stood. She reminded herself to remain calm and composed. Innocent until proven guilty, she thought grimly, though it was a phrase she usually reserved for courtroom defense. Still, she complied, stepping into the aisle and heading toward the aircraft door, her posture proud despite her inner turmoil. At the airplane door, another flight attendant gestured for Jennifer to exit. Outside the jet bridge, she encountered 2 airline staff members, one wearing an Aerosky uniform, the other sporting a badge with the airline's emblem. Their expressions were tense, and standing a few steps behind them, leaning against the wall with arms crossed, was Captain Caldwell himself, lips compressed into a disapproving line. Jennifer spoke first, her voice level. "I'm Jennifer Wilson, traveling to Los Angeles for a business trip. I was asked to deplane." "May I know why?" The uniformed staff member, a woman named Carla, according to her name tag, looked nervously at Caldwell. "Captain Caldwell has raised a concern." Jennifer's eyes flicked to him. "What sort of concern, Captain?" He exhaled loudly. "Look, Ms. Wilson, we have protocols about passenger behavior and flight safety. I'm not comfortable flying with certain risk factors on board." She blinked, utterly confused. "Risk factors?" I boarded quietly and took my seat. "What risk do I pose?" His jaw tightened. "I have reason to believe, based on prior experiences, that your presence may be disruptive or unsafe. I've had incidents on flights before with similar profiles. I'm not taking off until I'm assured there won't be trouble." The words hit Jennifer like a punch to the stomach. Though he hadn't used the word race, the implication was glaringly clear. She felt the indignation surge through her, hot and righteous, but forced herself to remain poised. "Captain Caldwell," she said in the calmest tone she could muster. "I'm a civil rights attorney on a routine flight. There's nothing in my history that would suggest I'm a safety risk. If you have any specific concerns, by all means clarify them." He let out a mirthless laugh. "We don't always get the full story in a passenger's booking details. I have the authority to decide who flies on my plane, and I'm exercising that right." Jennifer's pulse pounded. She glanced at Carla, who looked mortified. The second staff member kept silent, seemingly trying to meld into the background. "There must be some mistake," Jennifer said, her voice sharpened by anger. "If you suspect me of wrongdoing, show me proof or ask for a security check. But to disembark me without cause, that's unacceptable. Caldwell shrugged. My plane, my call. I'm not lifting off until you're removed, so take it up with management. Jennifer stood her ground, refusing to be cowed. She locked eyes with Carla. Let's call your supervisor. Right now. Carla nodded, fumbling for her phone. The tension was thick. A line of curious passengers, some from the economy cabin, had begun to form behind them, no doubt wondering why a passenger was being asked to leave. The pilot turned away, as if the conversation was over. The entire situation felt surreal, like a dark comedic sketch, if it weren't for the humiliating blow it struck at Jennifer's dignity. Moments later, another Aerosky representative arrived, this time a middle-aged man with a no-nonsense demeanor named George Duncan. He listened to Jennifer's account, face growing increasingly solemn. When she finished, he looked to Caldwell. Captain, can you explain your decision? Caldwell merely repeated, I have concerns about flight safety. Jennifer's voice trembled with contained fury. I want a formal statement of those concerns. Right now. George cleared his throat. Captain Caldwell, unless there is a concrete security threat, we have no policy that allows you to bar a passenger from flying. Ms. Wilson has passed TSA screening. She's a paying customer with no criminal or flagged background. Caldwell refused to budge, arms folded. Then I'm not flying. It's as simple as that. A hush fell over the group. The notion of a pilot refusing to take off because of one passenger was shocking, and in Jennifer's mind, appallingly blatant discrimination. She inhaled, prepared to fight. Little did she know the fight would escalate to a level that would shake Aerosky to its core. Inside the jet bridge, tension escalated with each passing second. The cabin door remained open, and passengers both in business and economy class peered curiously into the aisle or craned their necks to see the commotion. The faint hum of overhead lights did nothing to diffuse the sense of outrage building in Jennifer's chest. George Duncan maintained a tight grip on his clipboard. Captain Caldwell, he began in a controlled tone, this flight is already delayed. We're obligated to provide timely service to all ticketed passengers. If Ms. Wilson has done nothing to warrant removal, no threat, no altercation, then we have no grounds to force her off the plane. Caldwell shot him a glare. When a captain says he feels unsafe, that's grounds enough. Safety is paramount. If you can't see that, I'll make an official report. Jennifer, her voice steady, despite the roiling in her gut, interjected, I'm going to record this conversation now. She pulled out her phone, and the screen glowed as she set it to video mode. Captain Caldwell, are you stating on record that you feel unsafe because I, a black woman, am on this flight? A flicker of panic crossed Caldwell's face. George pressed his lips together silently, hoping to keep the situation contained. But the moment was already out of control. The pilot tried to school his expression. Don't twist my words. Race has nothing to do with it. I simply have the right to refuse any passenger. On what basis? Jennifer demanded, her frustration mounting. If you can't provide a specific reason, this is discrimination. Carla. The flight attendant who initially escorted Jennifer stood quietly to the side, her face etched with discomfort. She had no script for this scenario. Her superiors had always told her to defer to the captain in matters of safety, but never had she seen a captain cite a vague concern with so little explanation. George stepped in again, his voice carrying an edge of authority. Captain, if Ms. Wilson remains calm and has no contraband or flagged records. Refusing her is a violation of Aerosky's non-discrimination policy. We risk a lawsuit and a PR disaster. Let's handle this properly. Caldwell's stare hardened, but Jennifer noticed a twitch at the corner of his mouth, a sign of stress. He scanned the phone in Jennifer's hand, then turned back to George. "Fine," he barked. "If you won't remove her, I'll remove myself. I will not fly this plane with her on board." A collective gasp rippled through the bystanders. George's face drained of color. "Captain Caldwell, do you realize the repercussions of walking off your assigned flight? Aerosky could charge you with abandoning duty. We have a full flight here." But Caldwell, stubborn and resolute, simply said, "Then get another pilot. I'm done here." Those final words hung in the air, heavy with shock. Jennifer nearly dropped her phone. Never in her life had she encountered such blatant bigotry, disguised in a veneer of safety, manifesting in such a brazen manner. She knew prejudice existed. She'd dealt with it throughout her career, but this was uncharted territory. Here was a commercial airline pilot prepared to strand hundreds of passengers just to avoid flying with her. As Caldwell stomped away, a flurry of activity erupted. Carla hurried to prevent a scene inside the cabin, while George grabbed his radio, frantically calling for a replacement pilot. Jennifer stood there, phone still recording her breath coming in shallow bursts. Passengers began to murmur among themselves, and word traveled fast through the plane that a black woman had been singled out, causing the pilot to refuse to fly. And then came the ultimate blow, George's frantic voice into the radio. "We need a new captain for flight. AS-247 urgent. Wait. No, the only backup pilot is grounded in Chicago. Then we have no other licensed captain on site for a 777. "Are you sure?" He lowered the radio, face dark with dread. "We don't have another pilot available. The flight's cancelled." The words hit Jennifer like a sledgehammer. Around her, a chorus of groans and angry complaints rose from the passengers. Some shot hostile glances at Jennifer, blaming her for the cancellation. Others eyed Caldwell's retreating figure with fury. But in that moment, Jennifer realized one horrifying truth. Captain Caldwell had effectively used his position to punish her presence, displaying the raw face of unchecked power. And in doing so, he'd also upended the travel plans of nearly 300 people. Though trembling inside, Jennifer resolved that she wouldn't allow this blatant racism to stand. This was bigger than a missed flight or a delayed legal seminar. This was about challenging a system that allowed prejudice to masquerade under the guise of authority. The fight was about to begin in earnest, and nobody, not even Captain Caldwell, could foresee how far its consequences would reach. Chaos ensued at Gate 34B. Passengers clamored for explanations, forming a restless huddle around the desk. Some demanded compensation, others an immediate rebooking, and a few let loose their anger on the gate agents who struggled to maintain decorum. Jennifer found herself cornered by a frustrated business traveler in a wrinkled suit. "Are you kidding me?" he hissed, jabbing a finger in her direction. "We're stuck because you had to make a scene." She swallowed the immediate surge of indignation. "Sir, I was asked to deplane without cause. I didn't want this." The pilot. Another passenger joined in, a woman with 2 small children. "Couldn't you have just let it slide? I have kids here who are missing their grandmother's birthday." Her voice trembled. Jennifer's chest tightened, empathy mixing with frustration. "I understand your position, but I did nothing wrong. The pilot refused to fly with me." The woman shook her head, tears brimming. "Now we're all stranded." Before Jennifer could respond, a calmer voice intervened. Hold on, folks. Let's not blame the wrong person. A slender man with salt and pepper hair stepped forward. I was sitting close enough in business class to see what happened. That pilot singled her out with no justification whatsoever. This is on him, not her. Relief and gratitude warmed Jennifer's heart. She thanked the man with a small nod. While many travelers remained heated, a contingent began to realize the pilot's action was the true cause of the cancellation. Meanwhile, airline staff scrambled. Carla and George tried to placate passengers with meal vouchers and future flight credits, but the tension was palpable. Jennifer stepped aside, refusing to let herself be lost in the shuffle. She was determined to raise the alarm on this injustice. If the pilot could so blatantly discriminate against her, how many times had this happened before? She called her law firm. Her associate, Teresa, answered. "Jennifer, are you on the plane?" "No, the flight's cancelled," Jennifer explained, her voice shaking with barely contained anger. She recounted the incident. Teresa gasped in disbelief. "That's a civil rights violation, if ever I heard one," she said, already shifting into lawyer mode. "We'll back you up. Document everything." Jennifer ended the call as reporters from local news outlets, alerted by social media posts, began to trickle into the gate area. Word had spread like wildfire on Twitter and Facebook, with some passengers uploading live videos, hashtags forming around the fiasco. Flight cancelled over racism, grounded by bigotry. A young journalist from a local newspaper approached Jennifer with a microphone. "Ma'am, are you the passenger singled out by the pilot? Can you tell us what happened?" Jennifer glanced around, nerves tensing at the sudden glare of public attention. But she stood tall. "I'm Jennifer Wilson, a civil rights attorney," she said, meeting the journalist's gaze. "The pilot refused to fly with me on board, offering no legitimate reason. He effectively cancelled this flight for everyone. This is discrimination, plain and simple." Nearby, George Duncan's walkie-talkie buzzed. He excused himself, shooting Jennifer a fretful look before stepping away. In the background, the check-in monitors flickered with "cancelled" across flight AS-247's listing. The swirl of anger and confusion among passengers intensified. More reporters arrived, some from larger outlets, and airport security tried to maintain order. Jennifer answered questions methodically, her lawyer's precision guiding her words. She didn't embellish or lose her temper. She laid out the facts. The pilot's refusal, the lack of valid reason, and the final cancellation. One detail was crystal clear. It was the pilot's personal bias that had caused the meltdown. And that meltdown, unbeknownst to anyone in that chaotic gate area, was only the first domino to fall. By the time the day was out, social media would be ablaze. Aerosky Airlines phone lines would ring off the hook, and attorneys, activists, and news anchors would be dissecting the incident nationwide. Captain Caldwell's brazen act of prejudice was about to become a rallying cry for change, and Jennifer Wilson, though rattled, was ready to lead the charge. In the chaotic hours that followed, Jennifer found herself swept up in a whirlwind of media attention. Before she could even leave the airport, news vans from local stations, such as NY1 and CBS New York, lined up outside the arrivals area. Journalists flooded Terminal 4, hunting down witnesses and scouring for any official statements. Jennifer never imagined that a routine flight could turn her into the reluctant face of a headline controversy. She felt an uneasy mixture of apprehension and resolve as she spoke to more reporters. Her phone buzzed incessantly with calls and texts from her law colleagues, friends, and even distant acquaintances who saw the story on their feeds. "I can't believe this is happening," she confided to Teresa, who had arrived at the airport to support her. They huddled in a quiet corner near a Dunkin' Donuts, away from the throng of cameras. I was just trying to get to LA for my speaking engagement. Teresa, a petite woman with sharp eyes and an even sharper legal mind, touched her arm reassuringly. In some ways, this might be bigger than any speech you could have given. You're putting a glaring spotlight on an industry practice if it indeed runs deeper than just one pilot's prejudice. It wasn't long before a major news crew with a well-known anchor, Miguel Flores, from a national network, approached them. He had a microphone in hand, camera operator in tow. "Ms. Wilson, we'd love to get your side of the story. We hear you're a civil rights attorney." Jennifer exchanged a glance with Teresa, then nodded. They stepped in front of the camera, the bustling airport, a dramatic backdrop. Miguel introduced Jennifer to the viewers and asked her to recap the incident. Drawing a steadying breath, Jennifer explained how Captain Caldwell had singled her out, insisting she leave the plane despite having a valid ticket and no record of misconduct. Miguel's eyebrows shot up. "And when the airline management refused to remove you without justification, the pilot walked off, causing the flight's cancellation." "That's correct," Jennifer confirmed. "He cited vague safety concerns, but offered no evidence. No reason was given other than his personal feeling." "I believe this is a clear-cut case of discrimination. Do you plan to sue the airline?" Miguel asked. Jennifer hesitated, aware that her words would echo across news channels. "I'm exploring all legal avenues," she said. "At the very least, I want an apology and a commitment to prevent such incidents in the future. But the damage is already done, not just to me, but to every other passenger who was inconvenienced." The camera operator panned around, capturing the weary faces of stranded travelers. Some had recognized Jennifer from earlier scuffles and nodded in agreement. Others wore exhausted scowls, lugging suitcases in search of alternative flights. The entire scene was a testament to the pilot's unilateral decision and its far-reaching consequences. Soon the media scrutiny moved beyond Jennifer to the airline itself. Aerosky's corporate communications team scrambled to craft an official statement. A bland press release emerged online stating that Aerosky Airlines regrets the inconvenience caused to passengers of flight AS247 due to a personnel issue, and that they were investigating the matter thoroughly. Social media wasn't nearly so restrained. Twitter exploded with hashtags as users demanded explanations and accountability. Some posted outraged tirades about systemic racism in the airline industry. Others shared personal stories of discrimination. A handful of trolls even surfaced defending Captain Caldwell or accusing Jennifer of fabricating the whole story for fame. The noise was deafening. Back in her apartment that evening after a harrowing day at the airport, Jennifer scrolled through a deluge of online comments. She felt both gratitude for the overwhelming support and dismay at the hateful vitriol. One tweet, however, caught her eye. "Time to hold Aerosky accountable. If they can't control their pilots, they don't deserve our dollars." At Boycott Aerosky. That tweet, and others like it, began to trend. Public outcry gained momentum, calling for everything from Caldwell's termination to a full-scale audit of Aerosky's training programs. It was more than Jennifer had ever expected, but if this wave of support could drive real change, she was prepared to ride it. Late into the night, she called her mother to explain everything. At first, her mother was aghast, then proud. "You have to stand up for yourself and for anyone else who might face this," she said. "No one should go through that kind of humiliation." So Jennifer lay in bed, her mind spinning with the events of the day. Tomorrow, she'd reach out to her firm's senior partners and plan their legal strategy. Yet beyond the impending lawsuit or public statements, a deeper question gnawed at her. Was this just one racist pilot's isolated act? Or did it reveal a broader, more insidious culture within Aerosky and potentially other airlines? The truth she feared might be far more disturbing than she could imagine. The next morning, sunlight streamed through Jennifer's living room window, illuminating the scattered documents she had started assembling. Legal precedents, Aerosky policy statements, civil rights legislation. She was preparing for battle. Her phone beeped, alerting her to a text. "Call me important. Teresa." Jennifer dialed immediately. Teresa's voice was hushed but urgent. "I've been talking with the partners. They want to represent you pro bono. They see this as a landmark case." Jennifer's heart fluttered. The firm's support spoke volumes about the severity and potential impact of her case. "That's great, Teresa. I'm glad they're on board. But do they understand how high profile this is going to get?" "They do," Teresa confirmed. "They've already gotten calls from reporters. This could be the biggest civil rights lawsuit involving an airline in years. But we're ready if you are." Jennifer gazed at the frames adorning her walls. Photos of her graduating law school pictures with her parents at Thanksgiving. Snapshots of her leading community outreach workshops. Each image reminded her of the values that shaped her life: justice, equality, and bravery. "Let's do it," she said firmly. That same afternoon, Jennifer walked into her law firm's conference room, a sleek glass chamber overlooking Manhattan. The senior partner, Valerie Nichols, greeted her with a warm handshake. "Jennifer, we're sorry for what happened, but this might be the catalyst we need to shake up systemic biases in the airline industry." She set down a folder bursting with case notes. "We have enough for a strong discrimination lawsuit against Aerosky. We can also name Captain Caldwell personally." Jennifer's brow furrowed. "He should definitely be held accountable, but I suspect the airline's hiring and oversight policies might be equally complicit." Valerie nodded, her expression resolute. "Agreed. We'll press for internal records, training manuals, any history of complaints. If there's a pattern of similar incidents, we'll expose it." Teresa chimed in. "We'll file the complaint in federal court under Title II of the Civil Rights Act, which prohibits racial discrimination in public accommodations. Airlines fall under that category. Additionally, we can leverage state anti-discrimination laws." Jennifer gave a decisive nod. "Let's proceed." Drafting the lawsuit required meticulous work. In each line, they specified the blatant violation of Jennifer's rights. They cited Aerosky's official non-discrimination policy and Caldwell's contradictory actions. Witness statements from passengers willing to support Jennifer's account bolstered the case. They also included videos captured on smartphones, which had already circulated online. When the official complaint was filed later that week, it sent shockwaves through the airline industry. News outlets ran headlines like, "Civil rights attorney sues Aerosky over pilot's racist act and flight to nowhere sparks. Landmark discrimination suit." Aerosky's PR department scrambled to control the narrative, issuing carefully crafted statements about their zero tolerance for discrimination and ongoing internal investigation. Nevertheless, the damage to Aerosky's reputation was already underway. Stocks dipped slightly amidst investor unease. Social media was aflame with calls for boycott. Passengers reported feeling uneasy booking flights with the airline, lest they too be subject to arbitrary ejections. While some contrarian voices accused Jennifer of orchestrating the incident for personal gain, the overwhelming sentiment was one of support and a demand for answers. In the midst of the legal flurry, Jennifer received an email from the New York Times requesting an in-depth interview. At first, she hesitated, wary of overexposure. But she recalled her mother's words, "Don't hide. If you have the chance to change hearts and minds, take it." So she agreed, meeting with an investigative journalist in a quiet cafe in Midtown. During the interview, Jennifer recounted the ordeal calmly, but a flash of emotion arose when asked how she felt in that moment. "I felt stripped of my dignity," she admitted, voice quivering with remembered anger. "He had the power and used it against me because of who I am, not because of anything I did. And in doing so, he inconvenienced hundreds of passengers. That's not just prejudice, it's abuse of power." Her words resonated. The piece that appeared in the New York Times the following weekend was scathing in its portrayal of institutional complacency. It questioned whether such pilot autonomy, unchecked by corporate oversight, allowed prejudices to dictate public safety decisions. And so the stage was set. Jennifer's lawsuit was more than a personal quest for justice. It was a clarion call, challenging an entire structure. The looming question, would Aerosky stand firm behind Captain Caldwell, or would they sacrifice him to protect their corporate interests? As the nation watched, and as Jennifer steeled herself for the coming legal storm, the clock ticked down to what would become a pivotal confrontation in the courtroom and beyond. Inside Aerosky's glass-paneled headquarters in Atlanta, Georgia, executives scrambled to contain the spiraling crisis. The building, a towering structure with a marble lobby, usually radiated corporate confidence, but now a sense of panic threaded through each corridor like a high-alert alarm that wouldn't cease. CEO Gerald Phillips convened an emergency board meeting. Around the polished mahogany table sat the company's top brass vice presidents of operations, legal counsel, communications directors, and HR executives. The walls were adorned with framed photographs of Aerosky's achievements over the years, pioneering new routes, philanthropic efforts, green initiatives. Each image seemed to glare down at the assembled executives, demanding accountability. Phillips looked grave. His usual boardroom composure was absent as he reviewed the stack of documents in front of him, printouts of media coverage, social media posts, and shareholder complaints. The lawyer for Aerosky, a man named Robert Greenfield, cleared his throat. "The complaint filed by Ms. Jennifer Wilson is extensive. She's gathered witness statements and video evidence. We're looking at a serious discrimination lawsuit." The CFO, Janet Myers, chimed in. "Our stock is taking a hit. It's small now, but if public sentiment keeps turning against us, it could get worse. Investors are uneasy about the potential costs, both financially and in PR terms." Phillips massaged his temples. "Have we heard anything from Captain Caldwell's union representatives?" "Yes," Greenfield replied. "They're asserting that the pilot has the right to refuse any passenger if he deems it a security risk. However, they can't provide evidence that Ms. Wilson posed an actual threat." An uneasy hush settled over the room. Finally, Michael Bennett, the VP of Operations, spoke up. "Look, the union's stance might protect Caldwell's job to some extent, but it won't exonerate the airline if a jury or judge decides we're liable for discrimination. And from what I've seen of Ms. Wilson's case, it's compelling." The tension was palpable. The company's integrity and future hung in the balance. Greenfield straightened his tie. "We have two main strategies. One, we try to settle out of court. 2, we fight it in court and risk a larger verdict against us if we lose. Either way, the PR damage is done. Phillips closed his eyes for a moment, then spoke decisively. We're launching a formal internal investigation. We'll see if Caldwell has a history of complaints, and we'll weigh our options regarding a settlement. But first, we need to contain this fiasco. Across the country, Jennifer and her legal team prepared for the discovery phase of the lawsuit. They filed motions requesting internal Aerosky records, including complaints against Caldwell training manuals and any documents referencing discriminatory incidents. To Jennifer's surprise, other employees' former flight attendants, ground staff, began reaching out to her law firm. Many shared accounts of subtle racism or sexist practices at Aerosky. While not all stories directly implicated Caldwell, they painted a troubling picture of a corporate culture that sometimes turned a blind eye to internal complaints. In a small law office in Atlanta, just a few miles from Aerosky's headquarters, one such ex-employee, a former flight attendant named Camille Rogers, sat down with Teresa for a deposition. Her hands trembled as she recounted her experiences. I complained about a co-worker using racial slurs in the break room, she said, voice shaky. Management brushed it aside, said it was just locker room talk. I eventually quit because I couldn't take it anymore. Teresa gently probed for details, her eyes lighting up with each piece of evidence that could support Jennifer's claim of systemic bias. Camille even recalled a rumor that Caldwell had refused to fly with a Latino passenger years ago, though it never made headlines. I heard about it from other attendants, Camille explained. They said it got handled quietly. The passenger was removed and given a travel voucher as hush money when Teresa relayed this information to Jennifer. Her blood boiled. If true, it meant Caldwell was a repeat offender, and Aerosky had possibly covered up the incident. We have to dig deeper, Jennifer said. Subpoena everything. Emails, memos, internal chats. I want the entire paper trail. The revelations weren't confined to hush-hush stories either. A few investigative journalists, hungry for a scoop, delved into Aerosky's past lawsuits. They discovered smaller complaints that never gained traction in the media. One had eerie similarities. A black passenger claimed to be unjustly denied boarding by a pilot citing gut feelings. The case ended in a confidential settlement. As the pieces began to form a mosaic of corporate negligence, Jennifer sensed the gravity of what she'd undertaken. This was no longer just about Captain Caldwell's discrimination. It was about holding an entire airline accountable for ignoring or minimizing patterns of biased behavior. If proven, it could shake the aviation industry, forcing carriers to overhaul their policies and pilot training programs. Meanwhile, Aerosky's internal probe progressed slowly. HR employees bristled under the spotlight, worried about potential backlash for revealing any damning records. Caldwell himself was placed on indefinite administrative leave, though he continued to receive pay-fueling public outrage. Some employees quietly confided to each other that it was about time Caldwell faced consequences. Back in the CEO's office, Gerald Phillips struggled to find a middle path. He wanted to avoid a prolonged and ugly legal battle, but the pilots' union threatened to retaliate if Caldwell was fired without due process. The board demanded quick damage control, anxious to restore the airline's reputation before profits dipped further. They eyed a possible settlement with Jennifer, but with each new disclosure, the settlement cost and the risk to the airline's brand skyrocketed. As the swirl of negotiations, investigations, and depositions intensified, Jennifer refused to be swayed by half-hearted apologies or token gestures. Every day, She woke up to phone calls and emails from people inspired by her Fight Young lawyers, civil rights activists, and ordinary travelers who wanted justice. Her cause became a rallying point, a clarion call to confront discrimination, not just in the skies, but everywhere. And as the momentum grew, so did the stakes, setting the stage for a reckoning that neither Jennifer nor Aerosky could have foreseen. It was a sweltering August morning when Jennifer stepped out of a yellow cab in front of the United States District Court in Manhattan. She wore a tailored navy suit and clutched a leather binder containing her notes. This would be the first major hearing in her lawsuit against Aerosky, a preliminary injunction hearing where her legal team would argue the airline must overhaul certain policies pending trial. Reporters clustered on the courthouse steps, cameras clicking furiously as Jennifer walked by. She could hear them calling her name, but she maintained a focused composure. Teresa met her at the main entrance, her own arms full of documents. "Are you ready?" she asked. Jennifer nodded, breathing in the heavy summer air. "Yes. Let's do this." Inside the courtroom, the air was cooler, but no less charged with tension. The judge, a dignified man with silver hair named Judge Lionel Brooks, presided from a high mahogany bench. Aerosky's legal team sat at one table, led by Robert Greenfield, who glowered at Jennifer's team. At the opposite table, Jennifer's firm assembled alongside her, their posture exuding confidence. Once proceedings began, Jennifer couldn't help but feel a swirl of emotions. On the surface she was calm, a lawyer adept at detachment. But beneath that calm, she carried the weight of her personal history, with discrimination of the humiliating incident on flight AS-247, and of countless stories from others who had suffered similarly. Valerie Nichols stood to present the opening argument for the motion. "Your Honor, we are here because Aerosky's pilot, Captain Caldwell, refused to allow my client to fly based on nothing more than her race. Subsequent discovery has revealed multiple complaints against Aerosky for similar acts of discrimination that were either ignored or quietly settled. We ask the court to require Aerosky to suspend any policy granting pilots absolute discretion to remove passengers without concrete evidence of threat." Greenfield rose to rebut. "Your Honor, Aerosky has a robust non-discrimination policy. Captain Caldwell's decision was a singular event, fueled by legitimate security concerns. The pilot's union guidelines grant him wide latitude to assess risk." The judge peered over his glasses. "And what specific risk did Ms. Wilson present?" Greenfield hesitated. "That information is still under review. Your Honor, but we strongly oppose any measure that hampers a pilot's ability to ensure passenger safety." A hush fell. Jennifer's heart thudded. This was the crux of the case, Aerosky's claim of safety concerns, with no tangible proof other than Caldwell's personal bias. Valerie pounced on it, citing precedents where courts had ruled that vague gut feelings do not override civil rights protections. She pointed out that Aerosky's own training manuals did not support pilot-initiated removals absent credible evidence. The hearing progressed with testimonies. Carla, the flight attendant from that fateful day, stepped forward hesitantly. She recalled in detail how Caldwell singled out Jennifer, offering no rational explanation. Her voice shook, but her statement was damning. He said he had a bad feeling about her, and that he'd rather not chance it, she testified. When I pressed for details, he refused to elaborate. Next, Jennifer herself took the stand. She recounted the humiliating ordeal and the subsequent fallout. At one point, Greenfield cross-examined her aggressively, implying she might have escalated the incident for media attention. Jennifer maintained her calm. "I'm a civil rights attorney," she stated firmly. "I would never manufacture an incident that undermines the trust and dignity of so many people, including myself." The pilot's refusal was based solely on prejudice. By midday, Judge Brooks signaled for a lunch break. As Jennifer and her team stepped out into the corridor, the tension was palpable. The hearing would resume in the afternoon for Aerosky's rebuttal witnesses. Among them was Captain Caldwell himself, who had arrived under a wave of media scrutiny. He stalked the halls with a defiant glare, accompanied by his union representative. During the recess, Jennifer sat in a small private room with her attorneys nibbling on a sandwich she could barely taste. Teresa scrolled through online updates, journalists live tweeting from the courtroom pundits, debating pilot authority versus civil rights, an outpouring of public support for Jennifer. Despite the high stakes, she felt a flicker of optimism. Afternoon brought Caldwell to the stand. He appeared visibly tense, shifting in his seat. Greenfield guided him through a narrative he'd once faced a credible threat from a passenger who turned out to be on a no-fly list, so now he remained hyper-vigilant. He insisted that Jennifer's aggressive demeanor concerned him, though he couldn't provide details. When Valerie cross-examined him, she honed in on that absence of detail. "Captain Caldwell, can you specify one single action Wilson took that was aggressive or threatening?" he stammered. Her body language. She was intense, looking me dead in the eye. Valerie let silence linger. "Your Honor, is meeting someone's gaze a threat?" "Where is the line drawn?" she asked rhetorically. Caldwell reddened, and a murmur passed through the spectators. By late afternoon, Judge Brooks closed the session, announcing he needed time to deliberate on the preliminary injunction request. The main trial would come later, but this was a crucial early step. Before adjourning, he admonished Aerosky's legal team to produce any further relevant records, particularly about Caldwell's alleged past refusals to fly certain passengers. His gaze lingered on Greenfield. Any delay in providing these documents will be seen as non-compliance with discovery orders. As Jennifer packed her files, she felt the gravity of the day's proceedings. She'd stood face to face with the man who humiliated her, laid bare the reality of his prejudice, and forced him to account for it in open court. The fight was far from over, but a sense of empowerment coursed through her veins. She was not merely seeking her own vindication, she was illuminating a systemic flaw that needed to be fixed. A month later, the tension around Aerosky erupted into full-blown crisis. Leaked internal documents obtained by investigative journalists revealed a pattern of the airline's management downplaying racial bias complaints for years. Email threads showed that complaints against Caldwell had indeed been filed in the past, but top executives prioritized brand protection over swift accountability. Worse still, safety audits suggested that while Aerosky fixated on passenger screening, they had overlooked fundamental maintenance checks in a rush to keep flights on schedule. In response, the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, launched a comprehensive review of Aerosky's operations, extending beyond the discrimination allegations. As a flurry of inspectors descended on the airline's hubs, they discovered neglected mechanical issues, out-of-date safety procedures, and an alarming backlog of maintenance tasks that had been postponed to reduce costs. It was the very definition of a corporate meltdown. "I can't believe this is happening," an exasperated Gerald Phillips murmured to the board during an emergency video conference. "We're under fire on discrimination grounds, and now the FAA might ground us for safety lapses." Michael Bennett, the VP of Operations, looked as though he hadn't slept in days. We tried to warn upper management about maintenance concerns, but nobody listened. Everyone wanted to cut corners to boost quarterly earnings. The shockwaves were immediate. Passengers with upcoming Aerosky flights cancelled in droves, opting for rival carriers. Social media already aflame with #boycott. Aerosky now lit up with unsafe skies. Aerosky's stock plummeted, wiping millions off its market value in a matter of days. News outlets ran investigative specials on the airline's decline. From discrimination to danger. The troubled skies of Aerosky. Jennifer, meanwhile, observed this corporate downfall with a mix of astonishment and grim vindication. She never set out to bury an entire airline, but Caldwell's blatant racism had triggered a cascade of revelations, each unearthing deeper corporate rot. "It's a domino effect," Teresa commented, scanning another scathing article. One act of injustice exposed the whole system's neglect. As the main trial approached, Aerosky, desperate to salvage its reputation, made a strategic decision. They publicly fired Captain Caldwell and issued a sweeping apology to Jennifer. In a live press conference, CEO Gerald Phillips solemnly stated, "We recognize that certain decisions made by our staff were unacceptable. We extend our deepest apologies to Ms. Wilson. Effective immediately, Captain Peter Caldwell has been terminated. We are committed to rectifying systemic issues that led to this incident." But the apology rang hollow to many. "They're just doing damage control," watchers on social media scoffed. Jennifer and her team demanded more: an overhaul of Aerosky's policies, mandatory anti-bias training and compensation, not only for her, but for all affected passengers on flight AS247. They also insisted on an external watchdog to ensure Aerosky followed through on policy reforms. The final blow came when the FAA concluded its investigation. In a public statement, they declared that Aerosky was non-compliant with multiple safety regulations. All Aerosky Boeing 707 flights were temporarily grounded until the airline met a stringent list of requirements. It was the first time in over a decade that the FAA had taken such a drastic measure against a major carrier. The day the grounding was announced, Jennifer was in her office preparing for trial. She received a flurry of texts from friends. "They're grounding them. This is huge." Turning on the TV, she saw the news anchor's sober expression. In an unprecedented move, the FAA has grounded Aerosky Airlines' 777 fleet. Share prices have plunged further as travelers question the airline's overall stability. The ordeal began after a racial discrimination case brought by attorney Jennifer Wilson revealed deeper problems within the company. Jennifer felt an odd mixture of relief and sadness. She'd set out to call attention to racism and hold a pilot and possibly his employer accountable. She never imagined her fight would expose such a vast tapestry of negligence, ultimately grounding an airline. But she resolved not to waver. If a corporation let prejudice fester and ignored the public's safety, it deserved the consequences. In the ensuing weeks, Aerosky raced to comply with FAA directives, its tarnished reputation limping along in the harsh spotlight. Shareholder lawsuits piled on, claiming the leadership had breached fiduciary duties by hiding operational and legal risks. Meanwhile, Jennifer's civil case neared its final stages. Her attorneys negotiated from a position of overwhelming strength, given the avalanche of evidence against Aerosky. By the time a settlement proposal arrived, it was far more generous than Jennifer ever expected. It included monetary compensation, official public apologies, the creation of a diversity oversight board, and mandatory anti-discrimination training for all pilots and staff. The airline also pledged millions to civil rights organizations. Though the figure soared to an eye-popping amount, Jennifer's focus was on the structural changes. She wanted to ensure no one else would be humiliated or endangered by bigoted or reckless airline practices. And so, in the wake of one pilot's refusal to fly with a black woman on board, the entire edifice of Aerosky had been forced into a reckoning. As Jennifer prepared for the final settlement hearing, she knew that while her personal victory was significant, the broader triumph belonged to every passenger who ever feared being profiled, and to every worker who had been ignored by a corporate culture complicit in wrongdoing. Change was coming, and it was long overdue. From a single, shocking moment in a quiet airplane aisle, a chain reaction exposed prejudice, sparked a national conversation, and ultimately forced an entire airline to confront its failures. In the end, justice didn't just serve one passenger, it shook a corporation to its core and set a precedent for accountability across the industry. Thank you for joining me on this riveting journey of courage, conflict, and ultimate transformation. If this story moved you, inspired you, or made you think about the power of standing up for what's right, please give this video a like, share it with your friends, and subscribe for more powerful narratives. Together we can shine a light on hidden injustices and remind the world that one voice armed with truth can indeed make an impact far beyond the confines of a single airplane cabin. Stay informed, stay vigilant, and never be afraid to speak up.